Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com where I am Executive Community Leader of Future of Payroll, and I do several other things. But enough about me. I'd like to welcome my guest, Jennifer Cotto. Welcome, Jennifer, to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. This is going to be a real barn burner today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. You are, of course, Assistant Vice President of Payroll at L'Oreal, the much well-known cosmetics company. And we had a really interesting conversation last week around an article I was writing. I am writing for the magazine. It's actually been submitted to editorial around the rise of the Chief Payroll Officer. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you about that because you've seen payroll across, decades of time. I think 2 decades or so. And we're going to dive all into that. But first, maybe you could share with our audience a little bit about you. What's your passion in the world of work? What really gets you up and motivated every day in this particular field?
Of course. So I've been in payroll since 2005. I've been with organizations like General Motors and Johnson & Johnson and Carnival Cruise Lines. I absolutely love payroll. It's one of these industries and roles that you don't necessarily go to school for. I went to school for management information systems, and you just kind of fall into payroll. And if you ask anyone in the payroll industry or surrounding payroll, and you say, hey, how do you get started? Normally the stories are the same. They say, I kind of fell into it, or there was an opening, or there was a need somewhere. But once you kind of fall into this type of role, your passion for it grows and you never want to leave. So I'm very happy to do what I do. I love what I do. I can talk about payroll all day, every day.
That's awesome. That's just the kind of person I want to have on this podcast, by the way. That's why you're here. Yeah. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your journey to L'Oreal and your role right now, which is it's a pretty high level title for payroll, and that's one of the things that sort of caught my eye when I was searching for people on LinkedIn to talk about Chief Payroll Officer and the emergence of that role.
Sure. So I started off at Carnival Cruise Lines as a payroll specialist. I had been doing that for a couple of years while earning my bachelor's and my master's degree. Eventually, I did move on to the same university that I was earning my master's degree in, and they were insourcing the payroll department. Previously, for the 11 state universities back then, it was done in Tallahassee. So Tallahassee did all the payrolls for all the different state universities, and there was a decision made by the governor where each of the universities would run their own payroll. So that meant that they had to implement a new payroll system. So when I joined FIU, I was part of the PeopleSoft implementation. And that was my first indication that payroll was changing. Back at Carnival, there was a lot of data entry, a lot of hand calculations. The payroll engine was Lawson at the time. During my time there, and based on what I was learning from my bachelor's degree, we did add some automation. So for example, I was no longer keen in merit increases. We were able to load them into the back end. And that was relatively new and exciting for that organization. So then when I went over to the university, I'm like, okay, things are changing. We're moving more technology based. And I was there for about 1.5 years before I saw an opportunity with General Motors. And I did move from Miami to Detroit, and I get a lot of shocking faces when I say that. But Detroit really is America's comeback city. I was very happy to live there for almost 6-7 years, and definitely part of General Motors. And at General Motors, I kind of led the payroll systems team, and we were responsible for implementing SAP Global View, which is an ADP product, across several countries. I did it for the US, and then we moved on to the Canadian team, and then my team would absorb the running of the actual payroll. I had been there, I want to say just roughly over 5 years, if not 6 years, when an opportunity opened at Johnson and Johnson. And it was always my dream to have an opportunity with Johnson and Johnson, but they were also creating a shared services down in Tampa, which meant relocating from Michigan to Tampa. So I did take the opportunity and I joined as the payroll integrations manager. So I was responsible at that point to onboard what was their new HR, what do you call it? HCM, which was Workday. So I joined that project. We implemented the Workday system, and then my team was responsible for the interfaces. So again, throughout that whole journey, all you keep hearing is payroll and technology, because truly it is changing. The landscape is changing. And then I was quite happy at J&J, and someone from L'Oreal reached out and said, hey, we are also creating a shared services in Tampa. We're moving the work from New Jersey down. And we were wondering if you would be interested in interviewing for our payroll leadership team. So I did, and I was very happy to get the opportunity. I'm excited about the changes that are happening in the payroll field. Was very surprised that it was such a high level because I've never seen that in the past. Usually you can go up to maybe a payroll director or a payroll manager. So this was the first role I had seen at any organization, I think besides Comcast or Charter. One of those two has a vice president of payroll as well. An opportunity to be more strategic rather than in the weeds and doing the books and the general ledger.
Yeah, and it's been sort of a more recent phenomenon, a very welcome one. And let's go back to what's gotten us to this point. Why are we having this great conversation today versus maybe 10 years ago? I heard you talk a lot about technology. You've seen a lot of the systems, a lot of the major systems that are out there. What got us to this point? Why are we talking now about, why are we seeing more, higher level, sort of executive level, and, senior director level roles in payroll? What's going on?
I really think it has to do with the changing landscape as far as regulatory. I heard it once at a payroll congress years ago where someone said the payroll field is the most regulated field above medical. So if you can imagine bringing out a new drug to the market, you have to go through trials, FDA approval, etc. Yet payroll answers to over 400 jurisdictions. We answer to the IRS, Social Security Administration, in most payroll departments, the state, down to the local. It could be in my case, the small city of Detroit that we have to answer to. And it truly is that the landscape is ever changing, and we are, or were, reactive. We're reactive to the changes that were out there. So eventually you have to have a voice, right? And the voice, I call it the seat at the table. And the seat at the table is to be more proactive than reactive, meaning we should have someone who's looking out into the field and seeing what changes are coming, whether it's min wage or new overtime rules. Alabama had exempt overtime rules that were put in place and then taken away. So as of July 1st, that's going away. You need someone that's out there looking for these type of changes and engaging with HR to say, this is changing for your employees in XYZ organization or in XYZ location. And this is what we need to do to prepare the payroll system to react to it. Or here's what we need to do. We don't have enough time, but here are the workarounds, right? Normally that information is being dictated down to payroll in a smaller organization. I could also say in the past, it was the job of HR to look for that. But does HR necessarily have the skills that a payroll professional would? And, some voices say yes, some voices say no. But if you have an actual payroll professional, whether they're certified CPP or FPC, or maybe they have years of experience in payroll, they're constantly looking for those things, and they can bring the information back to the organization and sit down with the strategic leaders and say, here is what's coming. Here's what we need to do. And ultimately it saves money, because when you're wrong, you're paying penalties and interest.
Yeah. There's for the longest time, payroll was seen as a cost center, a back office function to contain. And part of that was because of the sort of the impediments that payroll faced with, sort of, I would say, a lack of evolution in the technology, which was, happened to be the case for a lot of business software back then, right? But payroll was so focused on just making sure that everyone got paid correctly and on time every pay period that there wasn't any breathing room or mental white space for payroll to kind of step back itself and payroll professionals to think, hey, wait a minute, we have, there's more than this, which is very important anyway, that we have to offer the organization. And to me, it seems a little bit symbiotic too, because organizations, as they adopt or brought on and deployed these newer technologies and were able to maybe shorten the payroll processing, the time it took to process payroll each pay period and these sorts of things, sort of, just by slow cumulative effect, everyone at every angle of this conversation, out there in the wild in business, figured out, wait a minute, there's a lot more that payroll can do. There's information in our payroll data, which maybe we didn't even have before, or any real, practical access to in any kind of a time frame that made sense. But now we have more immediate or close to immediate access to this data. Wait a minute, there's something we can do here. And then it became a matter of thinking, okay, well, maybe we should be consulting with payroll when we're making major organizational decisions versus telling them about it after the fact. Like, to me, it feels like a sort of a dance between the payroll professionals and payroll process and organizational leadership and the organization as a whole.
Absolutely. And something you just said resonated with me, right? For payroll, the train never stops. We literally don't have an opportunity to go, okay, we're not going to deal with these 50 things. We're just going to focus on this one. Because when we fail to pay the employee, we impact the company culture, number one. But more importantly, for me in my heart, I'm impacting that employee. I'm preventing that one person from putting food on the table. And it hurts me severely when we have errors because we are impacting an actual human being. So our train doesn't stop. Having the strategic role gives that headspace, as you said, to get ahead of these things and kind of think more end to end, right? But also the change in technology. So at General Motors, we had the BIQ dashboard, which was like best in quality. There's a lot of data running through the payroll system that we as an organization could leverage. Whether it's the amount of overtime that a particular cost center is charging, right? That could mean a change to headcount. But also you can use the payroll system to kind of highlight, okay, where do you need people versus where the people are versus, are we overpaying? Are we underpaying? In the case of California, you can tell whether or not, for example, HR is doing their job properly by the amount of penalty pay you're paying. If you're constantly paying penalty pay to your terminated employees, the first thing on the dashboard that would pop up, at least to myself as someone who loves data, is, okay, we have an issue with late terminations. Let's go work with the HR business partner to correct that. And again, it ends up always saving us money. But that space is available for us to think and problem solve due to the changes in technology. So there's a lot of automation opportunities out there. Payroll engines are getting way smarter. We have robotics, right? There's AI now available. But when we see issues or problems that are impacting the employee, now we can drive it within the payroll system. We can sit down and go, here is a change request. Here are the 15 things that we're going to correct. We're going to do it through automation. We need these inbounds versus these outbounds. And then you kind of, if you remember the old commercial, you set it and forget it, right? You put in the code The code's going to do their job. You've tested it thoroughly. And now you're no longer chasing the late termination. Now you're focused in this other area.
It's that whole proactive versus reactive stance, right? And being able to get into a proactive, non-reactive, natural state in payroll is the critical pivot point, in my opinion. And I think that may be what you're saying. And of course, that's reliant on, again, these advancements in technology, and also a bit of a partnership with the leadership of the organization, that is empathetic to this, or recognizes the need for this and the potential for this. And maybe you have a sponsor, an organizational leadership that helps the payroll department get a better system in place so that they can pivot to this role. And there's so many moving parts in that whole transformation sort of thing, which involves technology and people and all these other factors. Could you talk a little bit about payroll transformation? Because this, to me, is sort of and you probably agree, payroll transformation really is the immediate precursor to, or possibly the immediate outcome or result of payroll rising in the ranks of leadership.
Yeah, so I've seen payroll transformation, at least in the last 3 organizations I've been a part of. It starts from the brainchild of shared services usually, right? But shared services is honestly the first step in documenting the processes. And I say that to say, when you transform your payroll engine, the first couple of months, if not the first year or two, of even going out and seeing who your vendors could potentially be, is documenting those requirements. And in order to document the requirements, you really have to document the processes. So I see the evolution starting with the creation of shared services, the reduction of duplicate efforts, because sometimes you can have multiple companies under the same umbrella, which means you have multiple payroll departments. And really, do you need so many? Because when you have a payroll engine, you can run thousands of employees in the blink of an eye. So it starts by that. Then it goes into the process documentation. That eventually turns into the requirements. And then you can start to say, okay, this is the right vendor, right? And here are the pieces that we're going to automate. So even recently, we had the regular rate of pay was a manual process. It was a manual process at the last 3 organizations, actually, I was a part of. So right now, we are working on implementing a new payroll engine. I like to say it's going to take us until the 21st century. But one of the main components that I'm pushing for is to automate that regular rate of pay. We know what the logic is. You know what the inputs are. You can sit down and hand calculate it. How can I not train a computer to do that? So ultimately, when we go live very soon, that will be an automated point. So that is, I guess, from like beginning to end, how I see it transforming. It always starts with that flame being, how do we reduce, unfortunately, headcount? And you reduce headcount by creating the shared services. And then from there, it just flows. It flows naturally into, okay, let's look at the processes. And then the whys start. The senior leadership comes down and go, well, why do we do that? Why do we do this? And it's either a process constraint or it's a legal constraint, but that's where the payroll leadership comes in and go, here's my expertise. This is why we do so, or I don't know why we do it. This is how we should be doing it. And normally it runs into the technology. It's the automation.
Yeah. It really is fascinating to sort of taxonomize what a payroll transformation looks like. And I love that example that you shared, and sort of you had sort of an epiphany, really, where you said, wait a minute, why aren't we automating this piece of it? If I can calculate it by hand, then certainly a computer can do it. That's such a great sort of, for instance, anecdote that really that really illustrates the potential depth of impact of a payroll transformation. Let's talk about the Chief Payroll Officer. Let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on the emergence of this? And so just to set the stage for our audience, there's a rising, gathering chorus of voices in the industry, in the profession, and also the industry that serves the payroll profession, to establish a C-suite level role for payroll. And there's a lot of good rationale behind this. There's, I think, Chime is a company that's out there that they do interesting sort of fintech play. And they have the 30 by 30 initiative, which is an initiative to elevate 30 people into a chief payroll officer role by the year 2030. I think it's an admirable goal. Can you talk about this a little bit? What are your thoughts on the chief payroll officer? Why do you think it's needed? And what are some of the benefits that we might see from it? Some of the positive outcomes that we might see as a result of the chief payroll officer becoming becoming a role in the C-suite, and then sort of building from there.
Well, I think it was always in the works, if that's the right phrase to use. We're definitely not going to be the first, right? You had your chief information officer that kind of started to balloon up in the early 2000s. I'm starting to see a lot of chief human resource officers titles now change to be chief people officer, right? Very people focused. I'm also seeing a rise of chief transformation officer. So organizations alone are realizing that these pillars that kind of stick out and don't really fit somewhere else need that head, need that strategic thinker that can drive the business in that direction. So naturally, it looks as if the next one is going to be chief people officer. And I can only imagine, like I said, they kind of stick out, is we're too HR for finance, but we're too finance for HR. So when you see it like that, we're our own thing. And as our own thing, we really need our own leader to not only represent our interests, but represent the interests of the people, which is really my customers. They're who I serve. I serve the employee. Yes, I serve the organization when it comes to making sure that I'm not costing them money, but my job is to make sure that that employee is paid accurately, on time, and they're happy. Right? Mm-hmm. And then I guess the benefits of the C-suite is, I know I sound like a broken record because I keep saying a seat at the table, but I personally love coming into those meetings where it's HR or finance and they're talking about whatever new initiative they're trying to implement. And I can bring the voice or the voice of payroll to say, have you thought about doing it like this? This is the type of information I have in my system. We can spin it and do this, or we can add this. And all of a sudden you start to see the light bulbs in the room go off. And they go, well, I never thought about it like that. And that's what this new position kind of brings, is a diversified thought. It's someone from the outside now looking in and going, I have these resources. We can spin it and we can use it in different ways. And this is how I can possibly help you. And maybe that's not the solution, but it gets those people to start thinking differently. And that's what's important.
Yeah. You know what? I love what you said a few minutes ago. So you mentioned, we're not, as payroll, as a payroll person, you're not the sort of the royal you, right? You're not really in HR and you're not really finance. You're your own thing. And that to me is really key because, the workforce we hear about all the time, this, I don't want to say platitude because it's more than that, but it's often used as a platitude or just kind of an off the cuff saying, our workforce is our greatest investment, right? And yet payroll itself, the outlays, the money that goes out of the organization to pay all the individual members of this otherwise workforce, which is a singular word, right? But it's thousands of people at some organizations. That's considered a liability in the parlance of accounting, right? So you have an asset that's also seen as a liability. So, the CHRO or the Chief People Officer is going to see the workforce as an asset, right? And the Chief Financial Officer, they're going to understand that their people are an asset, but from their professional perspective, from their perch as the Chief Financial Officer, practicing accounting principles and this sort of stuff, they're going to see it as a liability. So that, to me, is a huge reason to have somebody that sits in between those two mindsets at the C level to bridge those gaps, to be that connective tissue, to help sort of broker agreement when it's needed between those two areas of the business.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny that you said, one side is looking at them as an asset, and then the other side is looking at the situation as a liability, whereas payroll's in the middle, looking at the person.
Yeah.
Right. I'm getting the phone calls. I'm getting the emails. I can hear that employee saying, okay, I forgot to clock in, so sue me. I still need my money to pay my kids' tuition next week.
Yeah.
And you have to balance the cost of the business, because finance is going to tell you, your net zero account, I don't have the paper to sell in order to fund that account. Then you have HR saying if this person is truly that upset, they could potentially leave the organization. That's what you're trying to avoid, right? Leave the organization and cause an additional liability. And then you have payroll in the middle saying, I hear both of you, but what's important to me is Mrs. Smith.
Yeah. That's the real employee experience. I mean, I've said for years, that, well, not years, but a few years, that I think payroll really is ground zero for the employee experience, and getting to this point where payroll can be consciously experienced by the employee, not just when it has a very stark negative impact on their employee experience, but also in a positive way, is one of the goals that we have here. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the more you invest in your payroll team and your payroll department is a direct, influence or correlation to the employee experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has been fascinating, and we could probably talk about this all day long, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love these kinds of conversations. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. This has been a wonderful episode.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.